Welcome to the CTEIS Expenditures training. My name is Doug Wiesner. I am the project manager for CTEIS. I've been working on the project since we started working on 17 some odd years ago. We're going to talk about expenditures today. A couple of things real quick. You can go ahead and if you'd like to make any comments you'd like into the comment area, that would be fine. However, if you do have a question, can you mark it as a question with the little question icon? That way they get recorded correctly and all that kind of stuff. So that helps keep everything sorted out nicely. This particular set of instructions is primarily for building reporters, although we will touch a little bit on some of the roles of the fiscal and the CPID. You can hear music. I don't have any music on anywhere. I'm not sure where we would find music. Let's see, is everybody... I think everybody should be muted. All right, well, we'll just go ahead and move forward. I don't know if the music might be more local. Okay, so let's get going. So expenditures, just a little bit, a kind of a broad picture about expenditures. I know we often get a lot of new people, and I think it's worthwhile to kind of explain a little bit how expenditures work. Expenditures are part of a yearly cycle that really starts with the generation of funds, the allocation of those funds, the spending of those funds, and then the reporting of those funds. So it all starts at the end of the school year when the funding process generates funds for every PSN based on a variety of contributors like the cost of the program, the number of students, the program's rank, and stuff like that. And so that will have programs or PSNs. Let's see if I can. So the PSNs here generate funds, and then those are rolled up to a building. And then each one of those buildings, as they're determined, are rolled up to a fiscal agency. And the fiscal agency receives the money from the state aid to be used to support the CTE programs. The primary funding source is 61A1, and that represents the state allocation to fund. But there's some other 61B, 61C, and you also have local funding sources. But all of these sources go towards the supporting these applications. The money goes to the building and then is spread out amongst the actual programs being defined by PSNs or program serial numbers. And the one thing that's interesting is that certainly with 61A1, that the programs that generate the funds don't necessarily have to be the ones that have the money being spent on them. So in this case, you can see that you can have programs in buildings 1 and 2 generating the funds for the fiscal agency, but when they're expended, they might be expended in buildings 1 and 3. And that's okay that as long as the money is spent within the fiscal agency, it doesn't have to line up one-to-one from a PSN. So you can spend money on PSNs that don't necessarily generate funds, or you can say, all right, these PSNs get funds this year, and next year the other ones get funds. But the whole idea is that you take all the funds that you receive and then you expend that, and then you have to report on it, and you report on them at the PSN level. So whatever PSN or program received funds, you will mark that down. And then again, those roll up to a building, and then those all roll up to the fiscal agency. And then we take a look at whether how much money the fiscal agency received matched the amount of money that the fiscal agency spent. And so those are some of the checks we do. And again, this is based on 61A, 61B, 61C, and other funding sources. And it's really important that you do report all the expenditures that you use for a PSN or a program. And there's a couple reasons for that. There are requirements that you spend all the money that you receive. Certainly for 61A1, you were required to expend all the money you receive, and you have to reporting to prove that. 61B is a little different, but you're expected to spend all the money you receive. Also, that there's a requirement that the money you receive does not exceed 75% of the total added cost of a program. The added cost of a program is the extra cost it takes to run a CTE program. For instance, a welding course or program costs more money to run than a math program or an English program because of all the equipment that's necessary. There's also a requirement that the funds you receive be put on program improvement, and there's ways to track that and see that. So there's some requirements that you have to meet, but it's important that you report all your expenditures, even if you meet your requirements, because that money is, that information is funneled back into the program cost determination. And that program cost determination is used during the funding formula to determine how much funds a particular program receives. So if you're underreporting the cost of a program, then the feedback of that is then the next time around you risk the chance that it will be funded less. So it's really important that you report all of your expenditures. Just talk for a minute about some of the support, and I will come back to this later, but the main idea here, especially when we get into some of the next things, that there's really kind of two types of support. You have your technical or procedural help, and those are things like, how do I import this? Where did the data go? If I push this button, something happened that I didn't expect. Those you can talk to us here at PTD, and we will help you out with that. However, if there is policy issues, like, is this an appropriate expenditure? Or where do I put these funds? Or things like that. Those are policy based, and those you need to talk to OCTE and Joan Church. And like I said, I'll come back to this in a minute. But thinking of support, we do have a lot of support available out there. I want to take you over to the support.cetis.com, which is our knowledge base. And then there is a expenditures section that has a lot of materials. So let's jump over there right now. But you'll see information on, you'll find this PowerPoint, you'll find a recording of this, you'll find a spreadsheet with a list of expenditures and import templates and the like. So let's go see what that looks like here. So I'm going to go over to screen sharing here. Just give me a second. All right. So hopefully you should be seeing the CTEIS site. And this particular site is the training site, and you can tell because it's got the little peach background on it on the home page, and it says training site on the top. And one of the things that you can do, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll have quick links to the knowledge base, and you can click on expenditures. And this will open up the support.cetis.com website, and it'll take you directly to the expenditures page. If you want to, you can just go to, if you just go to support.cetis.com, you can find the quick link to expenditures if you scroll down a little bit, along with important dates, including the due dates for the expenditure report. Or you can go up to the menu at the top here and then choose data entry and then expenditures. And in the expenditures section, you will have a expenditures guide, which is goes along with this presentation. You'll have this actual PowerPoint, videos, including this one being recorded. You'll have specific review guides for fiscal agents and CPIDs. The one I want to look at real first, though, is the you have the expenditure guides, and these there's no updates this year, so even the 2020s are still good. So if you click on the one by category, it's a spreadsheet. I go ahead and open that up. And if I go all the way over to the left, the first tab is just the expenditure guidance by category. And by category means that they've broken out all the different expenditures into categories. There is a section here on instructions and guidance on how to report your 4043 or your expenditures. 4033 is the numerical designation for the expenditure report. So a lot of times you'll hear 4033 report or expenditure report, and they're pretty much the same thing. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. So a couple of things that are important on here. As I mentioned before, there are requirements, and this kind of defines the requirements. It talks about that if you receive funds, you have to report them. And a minimum of 90% of the funds received have to go to program improvement, and that your expenditures must meet or exceed the total required expenditures, and that goes into the idea that the money received cannot be more than 75% of the added cost, and from that information we can calculate what the total required expenditure would be, and then you have to make sure you match that. And again, these matches, the 90% and the total required expenditures, are calculated at the fiscal agency level. So if you're working on your building and program expenditures, you will not be able to see whether you're made the 90% because it's not based on a building's expenditures. It's only based on a fiscal agency's expenditures. So it's like, you can only tell your piece, and your piece adds up to the whole. So keep that in mind. Some other general instructions down here. Expenditures should only be reported for state-approved CTE programs in which enrollments were reported. So if you receive funding for a program, then you have to report expenditures for it, even if there were none. Expenditures reported at the PSN level or the program level. Expenditures for the following funds need to be included on the expenditure or 4033 report. And I mentioned this before, the 61A1, 61B, 61C, and any other state or local funds that have been used to support the CTE programs. Do not include Carl D. Perkins funds on the expenditure report. All right. Okay, here's a question. When you say fiscal agencies, do you mean local districts or the CPID region? In this case, I mean the local. It's the fiscal agencies are the districts that are responsible for the buildings financially, and the fiscal agencies report to the CPID. So I'm not referring to the CPID regions. I'm referring to the fiscal agencies within the CPIDs. There's a hierarchy within CTE where it's kind of at the top level. You have CPIDs, and there's 52, and the CPIDs are the career education performance districts, something like that. And then within the CPIDs, you will have one or more fiscal agencies, which is responsible for managing the finances. And then within the fiscal agencies, you will have one or more operating districts, which typically represent ISDs. And then within the operating districts, you'll have your operating buildings where the courses are being delivered. And so in the case of expenditures, you report the expenditures by program, which roll up to a building, and then those roll up to the fiscal agency, and then eventually will roll up to the CPID. So hopefully that makes sense. And we'll touch a little bit on that a little bit later. All right. So this particular section talks about how to prorate calculations. And this example is supposing that you have a principal that does in this case, you can prorate by time, in which case, out of his day, he spends 5 hours of a 5-hour day, in which case he would 100%. Or if he spends only half of his day dealing with CTE, then you would prorate it, and half of his salary would go to the half the salary would go to an expenditure. Or you can do it by students. For instance, if a principal had 35 students out of 100, then 35% of their salary would be associated with the expenditure. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in a minute, but you can start to see, so these are your expenditures listed by function and object code, and they're categorized by the different categories. And you can see here that you've got your example, and they list like paraprofessional, substitute teachers, what the function code is, what its official description is, the object code, and the object description. These three columns over here, you're always going to report these on the 4033, and it's always allowable for 61A1 funds. But the program improvement identifies whether this expenditure is considered for program improvement. So teacher salaries are not considered program improvement, but the overtime is. So you can look at this and try to figure out what will be considered as program improvement, because as I mentioned before, that 90% of your expenditures have to go to program improvement. And the CTEIS application will help you calculate this. But you can go down and you can go down the list and see all the different categories. Each one of them has a little bit of some instruction at the top on how to use it and information about it. When it comes to support, though, if you have questions about your which function and object code you should use for what type of expenditure, those are types of questions that you need to ask OCTE about. You're more than welcome to call the help desk and ask about them there, but they will point you to Joan over at OCTE. So this spreadsheet, again, is available at the knowledge base in the expenditures section, along with a lot of other helpful information. So let me go back to here. So this information is available. It has the list of all the expenditures, the object codes, and the program improvement items. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at what's going on within CTEIS and how you put in your expenditures. The first thing you need to have to do is be able to log in. In order to log in, you will need two things. You'll need to have a MEIS account, and you can go to the m.state.mius MEIS website and get one. And once you get one, then you need to talk to your fiscal agency authorized official, the level 5 official, who will take your MEIS account and connect it to CTEIS so that you can use your MEIS username and password to log into CTEIS. So you need to have both of those things done. If you just getting a MEIS account is not enough to get into CTEIS. You need to have your MEIS account and have it then entered into CTEIS. So you need to do those two things. For this year's expenditures collection, you will just need a MEIS account. However, in a couple of months, more like around January, we will be migrating over to My Login. So, if you only do expenditures, then expect next year that you will need to have a My Login instead of a MEIS account. If you do expenditures and enrollments or follow-up, then know that in the coming months that we're going to be migrating over to My Login. And there will be more information coming shortly in October about what the migration will be like. All right. So once we log in, we'll be able to work on the expenditure report. And I think we've kind of covered all these, why is it important. And when you do expenditures, it's really kind of a 4-step process. First, you need to make sure you collect all the information, and then you need to enter the information, then you need to validate it, and then submit it. So the first thing you need to do is think about what information I'm submitting and where do I get it. You need to report all expenditures for state approved programs which enrollments are reported. And this would be programs that, and how you can find this out by looking at some of the funding reports. Let's go ahead and switch over and do that now. So if I go over to back over here and I go to back over to CTEIS and I go ahead and I log in, and this is the training site, and this can be found at train.ctis.com. And if you have a username and if you have a MEIS account already that's hooked up into CTEIS, then you can use that to log into the train account, and you can kind of practice a little bit and play around and poke and try some things without having any of it be counted towards the actual production. So anything that you do in the training account won't be saved, if you will, and might get overwritten, but it allows you to go in and kind of, if you're not sure about what you're doing and you want to go in and just poke around without making changes to anything, then you can do it in the training site. So here I am in the training site and I've logged in. I would go to data entry and I go into the expenditure section. If you've not been asked to work on enrollment, you will not see this enrollment section. You'll only see the sections that you've been granted within CTEIS. So if you're doing enrollments and expenditure, you'll see both. If you're only doing expenditures, you'll only see expenditures. So something else I'd mentioned that you can see, you have to report on all programs that received funding, and you can kind of take a look at that if you go to the funding report section. And if you go into reports and then to funding reports, and it's a little slow this morning. And if I go into the X10 CPID or the CPID total section 61A funds, this will show me, if I hit select on that and give it a second to load up, this will show me by CPID. And so I can find my CPID. And it'll show you by CPID, by zip code, all the different programs that receive funds because they had enrollments. So this is one place you can kind of look. You can also, if you go back to expenditures and go to expenditure entry, you'll have to select your district, and this is the fiscal agency. And many of you will only have one district. Some of you might be responsible for more than one fiscal agency. But you select one, and then you can select the building, because as I said before, all the expenditures roll up and down through buildings. And I might choose a building. And then this particular grid here, if I click on it, it will expand, lists all of the programs that are in that building, the type of program, the funds that they received, and whatever enrollments that they had. Now, one thing you'll notice here, that this year, and this is a kind of unique year because of COVID and all the things that happened last year and the way that funds were allocated. Funds were allocated last year by fiscal agency, but they weren't really allocated by PSN. So we didn't really have the ability to break out the amount of money a fiscal agency received by PSN, so we just averaged it. Normally, these would all be based on more like the number of enrollments they received and the program cost, but this year you will see them all just be the same. And this really doesn't matter for expenditures, again, because this is the amount of money generated by these PSNs, and it does not have to match the amount of money expended into the PSNs. So this is just, for informational purposes, but it might strike you as odd that they're all the same, but that's a result of last year's funding process. And, everybody's got their fingers crossed that we never have to do that again. All right. I can go up here, and if I wanted a list of all my programs that I have to go track down expenditures for, I can go to the building, I can pull up this, and then I can export this to Excel. I can click on that and open that. And this will give me an Excel spreadsheet of all the PSNs, their zip codes, their program names, their types, and that I need to go track down all the expenditures for. All right. So going back to the slides real quick, you need to report expenditures for all the PSNs, and showed you how to get a list of your PSNs. And you typically will, talk to your business office, your finance office, and say, from them is where you'll get the information about the expenditures. There's an example in the associated guide that talks about creating a series of contacts and a contact table that you establish over time, and you can use year after year to figure out where do I need to go to get the information. The information that you do need to grab is you need to know the amount of the expenditure reporting, which program or PSN it applies to, the function and object code or the type of expenditure, and if you're going to spread this over multiple programs, how you want to spread it, what percentage is you're going to be doing that, how you want to prorate it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute with distribution tables. All right. So then we talked about generating the worksheet by finding your building and your district and your building, and then exporting the list of all the programs. So that might be helpful. So the next thing you do, once you've gathered all your information, and now you want to start entering it into CTEIS. And there's 3 different ways that you can enter expenditure records. You can do it manually. And if you have small programs, that might be not be a bad way to go. You can create distribution tables, in which case, if you need, if you've got some kind of an expenditure like a counselor that's working on multiple programs, then you can distribute the counselor's expenses or expenditures across the programs in a variety of different ways and through the use of distribution tables. And then lastly, you can do imports. And imports were designed to kind of match what you would submit to the FID. And if you can produce those same kinds of files, then you can import them into CTEIS and hopefully save yourself some time and some headaches. All right. To enter expenditure records, you're going to go through CTEIS, and the first thing you do is select the building or the district and then the building like we did a minute ago. So then select the PSN that you want to apply an expenditure to, and then select the function object code, enter the funds, make any notes you want, and then click Save. So let's take a look at that real quick. All right. So we've come into the expenditure entry area. We've selected our district. We've selected our building. And then we have all of these programs to pick on. So you will click on the button to the left, and that'll open up the expenditure table, the Add Expenditures table. And so what it's saying here is asking you to enter an expenditure for PSN 3441 construction trades in the building of the Dickinson Iron Tech Center. So I choose then the function code, which is what type of function it'd be, let's say CTE instruction, and then the object code. So this is a cascading drop down. So depending on what function code you put in, you'll get different object codes. And say, okay, that's teaching. And so this, maybe I spent 15,000 came out of my 61A1 funds, 2,000 came out of my 61B funds, and 500 came out of 61C, and then another 500 came out of my local funds. And I can put a note in here. This is for Bob's salary or something along those lines. And then I can click on Enter Expenditure. This is a link here that we're going to update that to make sure that that's a little clearer on that button. But you click on enter expenditure, and then down at the bottom, it adds it to the expenditure table. And it will list the PSN, or the type of expenditure, and this is a direct expense to a PSN, the PSN number, the zip code, the function code description, the object code description, and the breakdown of the funds expended and the total and any notes. So I can do this again, and for the same building, I can come up and say, all right, this is going to be improvement in instruction, and it's going to be curriculum development, and I'm going to put in 1,000 from 61A1 and add that. And then you can see that it lists that here. And then I can come up here and then choose a different PSN. So this is now showing that I'm going to do a different PSN, and then I can do CTE instruction, teaching, and this one it had no 61B or C, but I might have had some from local funds. Add that, and you can see down here that it's added that under a different PSN, but you have all the information in there. I'm sorry, this one would be the same PSN. I can go in there and edit them. If I click on edit, it'll pop it back up into this box, and then I can say, well, that shouldn't have been 5,000. That should have been 2,500, and then enter it, and then I've updated that amount. I can just flat out delete them too if I want by clicking on the delete button. Click on delete. It's going to verify that you want to delete it. I say okay, and it's gone. So this is how you enter in individual expenditures for a PSN. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and throw them in the box, and we can address them. Hopefully that this is all making sense. All right. So this just kind of steps through that whole process that we to enter in the expenditures. Another option is to use distribution tables. And then what this allows you to do, as I said before, is if you have a principal or a counselor or some sort of expenditure that applies to more than one program, you could kind of do the proration in your head and then enter them in individually, or you can use a distribution table to spread them out across the different programs. So this slide just kind of shows an example of it. So for instance, that you have, some travel expenses that you might have had a teacher that had to go from, different schools to provide instruction, in which case you would want to distribute those travel costs across different PSNs, or maybe the teacher had to travel to a training program or something. You want to spread that across. And so you can distribute it, you can prorate it based on a variety of different ways. You can do it directly. You can just say, all right, let's split this up 25, 25, 50, or you can do it based on the total number of students, which kind of gives you a size proration. Or you could do it evenly. You could just do it 33, 33, 33 kind of thing. So some different ways to do it. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So we go back to here. So the first thing I need to do is create a distribution table. And these need to be created every year. So I go into data entry and I click on distribution table. And it'll come up in a minute. So again, the first thing to create a distribution table, I want to identify the programs that I want the expenditure to be distributed over. So I have to select the programs. So to select the programs, I have to identify what district I'm in, and then I can identify which building I'm in, if I'm just spreading them across programs in a building, or if it's something that needs to go across every, maybe every program in a district, you can select all in a district. But we're just going to look at my building, and I'm going to use the little checkbox over here to check, say, okay, these are the 3 buildings. I'm sorry, these are the 4 programs that I want to spread an expenditure across. And then I identify how I want to spread it. I can do it based on student enrollment. So if one program had 100 students and then the other one had 10 and the other one had 10, then they would be relative to the number of students. I can do it even, in which case it'd be 33, 33, 33, or I can create my own if I have some calculus that I want to use. So in this case, I'll say use student enrollment. I have to give it a name, and we'll say this is student list for X programs. And then I create the distribution table. It'll take a second to go through, figure out, do all the math. Then you get the little success. And so it'll show this up here, and then I can click on view, and it shows me what the percentages will be used for each one of these programs. So the first one will get 40.3%, the second one will get 38.5, 6.4, and 14.6. So in this case, I've created the distribution table. Now I can use this to distribute expenditures. So I'm done here. It's saved, and I can create more in here if I want to. If I go back, I can also delete it if I'm done with it. But I want to go back to expenditures and go to expenditure entry. And I'm going to choose my building again. And you'll see in my list of I have my list of PSNs, but down here at the very bottom, I have a distribution table. So this is actually kind of like a group of PSNs. So this is, I can select this, and then I can say, all right, enter the expenditures for the distribution table. So I'm going to do guidance services, and I'm going to say for counseling, and 1,000 is going to come out of 61A, 1,000 is going to come out of 61B, and 1,000 is going to come out of other. And then I hit enter, and a list down here at the bottom that I have $3,000 going to be distributed based on my distribution table for the function object code guidance services counseling. So that's how I use a distribution table. So how does that, what does that look like when it gets broken down? Well, I can go into my data entry, and I can go to expenditure review. And this is part of the process to validate and submit your expenditures, but you can also use it to review. So I'm going to choose the building. And if I click on validate, it's going to go through and look at all my expenditures and individually calculate them out. So once I've done that, you can see that all of these guidance services have been split out based on their percentages to each one of these programs. So you can see that this is, this one had the 40.3%, this one had 1.4%, this one had 62 or 6.4%, and the like. So you can see how those are all broken down, and then they're all totaled up. This particular, I put in some expenditures directly into this 3441 PSN, and you can see that one was there. But then you can see that it also had the prorated portion of the guidance services that I used with the distribution table. So that's a nice, useful tool if you're trying to spread expenditures across multiple programs. Okay. So distribution tables. The next thing you can do is by doing imports. And this allows you to hopefully be able to, from your financial system, export a file that looks similar to the one that you would submit to the FID, where it breaks down expenditures by funding type that can then be imported into CTEIS to manage all this stuff. And you can kind of, if we go over to, if we go back over here and we look back onto the knowledge base, there is a importing expenditures guide. So you can go and you can take a look at this, and this will go and show you what the Excel template is supposed to look like, and it'll show you you can say that this Excel template is based on a file format defined by the FID, which is the Financial Information Database. And you can go check that out there if you want. But this basically is the codes that they've already defined that hopefully your system can deal with. So you'll want to use that. And then it talks about how to import them and how to review your import. So you can take a look at that. Also in here, it has the expenditures header template, which this is what the Excel spreadsheet looks like that you would use. And you can see it has in here your function code, your object code, the program code, grant code. And what these translate into is if I do that and I do this, and then I can look on here. So my function code is always going to be 11. So this one would just always be 11. And then, I'm sorry, that's the fund code. The function code corresponds, I need to enable editing on that and bring that back over to here and bring that back up. So this would always be 11. This would be the function codes similar to what you would have in here in terms of function code. So if I wanted to put guidance service in here, I would put 212. Then you have your object code, which is going to be your object code. And in this case, it would be 1220. And then it says your program code, which is going to be the zip code. So in this case, it would be, say, 5100 or 51000. And then the grant code identifies whether what funding source. So I can put in 61A, 61B, 61C, or other, and they have to be exactly those. If I don't put in a code or I don't put in one of those four, it's going to default to 61A. So I'll just put in 61A1. And then I need to identify what school or what building it's going to be, and I need to put in the building number or the operating building number. And there's a couple of different ways you can figure that out. If I go over here to expenditures, expand that up again, it'll tell me right here that this is I'm sorry, this is my district number, this is my building number. So you can find it here. You can also go up to if you click on your username, there's a little link there. And if you pull that up, it will list all of the buildings that you've been assigned to work with. And you can see them. If you look at the buildings over here, this is the first number is the operating agency number. The second number is the operating building number. So if I'm looking at Dixon ISD, again, the tech center, then it's 06545. So I can enter that number in. All right, so that's the school. So what did I say? It was 06545. The other is, since it used to be that a PSN um, was, defined within a building, or I'm sorry, it used to be that a zip code in a building defined a PSN. But since we've gone to allowing both regular and early middle colleges programs to exist within a building under the same zip code, we have to identify whether it's a regular or an EMC. So I have to type in here REG or EMC if it's one or the other. It will default to reg if it's left blank. And then I put in the dollar amount. And I can list these, for every single one of my expenditures. Again, you can only do one funding source per line. So, uh, if I was doing it over here and I went to expenditure entries, if I selected a PSN, I can enter all 4 of them in at once, but here I have to do it one per line. But the idea is that you're probably not going to be creating these exports. You're not creating these exports one at a time by hand. You're probably going to be exporting them out of your financial systems. So hopefully that's what that it doesn't matter that that's a little extra writing in there. Question. Let's see. Is that still valid for 2021? I'm sorry. Is what still valid for 2021? The other question was, when I click on my name, I don't see it. So if you should be able to click on your name right here. If you're not seeing it, I'm not sure what's going on. Give us a call at the help desk and we can help get that resolved out. Let's see here. Are all the guides still valid for 2021? I'm assuming that you mean this right here. Yes, I confirmed with Joan yesterday that all of the function object codes are, as from 2020 are valid for 2021. So these are all the ones that are on the website that you'll find. Got too many things open. The ones that you will find, that's it here. Yeah, this year, the expenditures guidance for 2020 is valid also for 2021. We're going to update that listing right there, but that is valid for 2021. Okay. So I go ahead and I create my import sheet. And I have one that I will show you that just a simple one I've created. Pull this up real quick. All right. So this is one I've created. It's got a handful of expenditures in it, but I can go to, oops, where that came from. Too many things open. I can go to my expenditures import function, and it's going to ask me to choose a file, and I'm going to choose the expenditure import example, and then I load the records, and it will load all of them in from the file. And if there's a little green bar here, it means that everything checked out. And some of the things it'll check out, it's going to verify that that the building exists, that this zip code exists in this building, and that there is a PSN that represents this building with this zip code and this type. It's going to make sure that your function codes are right. It's going to make sure the function object code pairing is correct. So it's going to check a whole bunch of things. And as long as everything looks good, you'll get a green bar. If you do something wrong, you'll get a reddish pink bar. If it's going to give you a warning, it'll give you a yellow bar. But in this case, it's saying it's unable to identify the PSN. And what that means is that this SIP code does not exist in this building. And so it's couldn't find a PSN that represented that zip code in that building. So therefore it can't import anything. So it's just it throws up a red bar here that says it can't import anything. The other thing it notices is that in the file that I had, for my funding or my grant code, I had something that didn't fit my list. And so it's telling me that the grant code is going to just get to, trying to figure out what the grant code would be. I'm just going to default it to 61A1. And you can see that there. And if that was the only problem, then I could have imported it, but this would have shown yellow that it's going to change the funding code. So once I've checked all this out, I can go ahead and say import the records. And what it's going to say is, it's going to let you know that the process of importing will overwrite whatever whatever records are already in there. So if you have a function object code for that PSN already in the system, it'll overwrite it and update it with these amounts. So that allows you to to rerun these imports over and over again and not have to worry about a doubling or tripling them. But if you're doing it manually and they're doing it by imports, then you have to make sure that you're coordinating so you don't step on your own toes. Also notes that records in red will be ignored and not imported. So if I do this import, that one record at the bottom won't be imported. And then once they're imported, I can go back to the expenditure entry or the review section to see that they were imported. So I'm going to go ahead and say import expenditures. The import was successful. And now I'm going to go back over to expenditure entry. And I actually imported these into my second district. And I'm going to go to Southwest here. And these are all the imported expenditures that I put in. So you can see how all that works. So that's a way, and it'll tell you that these are imported and when. So you can, if you do need to figure out when you imported things or differentiate between imported and manually put in, you can look in the notes there and see that. So hopefully you'll take advantage of the imports. Because they're a nice, quick, and easy way to get a lot of imports, and they're asking for a lot of detail here. So hopefully that will be helpful. All right. So we've done the import. So now we can say that we have all of our data in the system. So the next thing we need to do is run our validations and then submit the expenditure reports. And we do that by using the expenditure review section and do the validate like I showed you in a minute. So we'll come back over to here and do that. So I'm going to come back over to screen sharing. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to select on data entry and I'm going to go to expenditure review. And I'm going to select the district. And then after I've selected the district, it will list all of the buildings that I've been assigned to me. They're a part of this district. And the first thing it's asking you to do is to validate. And what the validation does is make sure that, again, that the buildings and the PSNs are correct and that the function object codes are correct and that everything's done right. It will also break out your distribution tables and create the records in your distribution tables. And then you can kind of go down and make sure you can look at these, and these will roll up to buildings. And so if you have multiple, so this rolls up to the building here. So this is the Tech Ed Center, and you'll have them all separated out by the individual PSNs. Something to note that if you're using distribution tables, that the distribution tables don't actually do their distribution until you run this validation. So if you run a validation and say, oh, my distribution tables, I messed up the distribution, and go back and change your distribution table, it will not be reflected in the final result until you rerun the validation. So, or if you go in and run the validation and then complete your program and then later change your distribution table, it will not be reflected. So you have to make sure that you run the validation after you make any, you create or modify your distribution tables. So, so once you've got all your expenditures in, you look at them, and as I mentioned in the beginning, all of this it's entered in by PSN and then aggregated or rolled up to the building, and then you submit the expenditures building by building. So in this case, I can look at the Dickinson Iron Tech Ed Center, and I can look at all the expenditures I put in. And then if I look at this and say, yep, that's good, I looked at them all, I can hit complete. And by doing that, it will come back here in a second and mark this as complete, I believe. Yeah, there it goes. It takes a second because it runs through, but it now marked it as complete. So I can now no longer validate it. I can still come back and view it, but it kind of fixes these expenditures so that I can't change them now. I can't make any changes to this because I've marked it as complete. And what this does is it will let the fiscal agent know that this building is ready for review. And then if I'm a fiscal agent, I can come in and look at that, and I'll show you about what that means in a second. But this is what you want to do to submit your expenditures by building. Let's see here. Do the guides provide step-by-step instructions of this process? Yes, the guides provide a lot more detailed and step-by-step instructions, including the imports. And you also can, this video is being recorded, and you can re-listen to this video if that's helpful. Also take advantage of the help desk. John is on the other end of that, and he's very helpful and can help get going. All right. So this is what a building reporter does. And as I mentioned in the beginning, all the expenditures are entered in by building reporters. And to be able to enter in expenditures, you need to be granted the building reporter role to enter in these. If you're a fiscal agent and you want to do expenditures reporting and want to enter in expenditures, you have to grant yourself the building reporter role so that you can, use that role to enter in your expenditures. But if you are a fiscal agent and someone has submitted a billing to you for review, you would be able to go into an admin tab, and only if you're a fiscal agent or a CPID administrator will you have this tab here. But you can click on that, and then you can go into the fiscal agency monitoring, and you go to the fiscal expenditure fiscal agency review. In this case, I would select the district I'm interested in. And it would list the buildings that I'm a fiscal agent for. And then it would aggregate all of the expenditures from all those buildings. It tells me what the total amount of money I received for that fiscal agency, what my expenditures are, and whether I've met any of my matches or not. And again, this can only be seen by the fiscal agent. It can't be seen by the building because the building is just a contributor to the whole. And it's not necessarily a proportional contributor. That's, it's up to the fiscal agent to determine how the buildings contribute. But you'll be able to see the information here. You'll be able to see all of the expenditures. Um, and if you are a fiscal agent, you can go back into here, and there is a guide for fiscal agents and a guide for CPIDs. But once you're, you know, you'll have the option to mark a building, or I'm sorry, you'll be able to, if the building, it'll show that it's been checked. You'll have the option to mark your the building as submitted as the fiscal agent, and then the CPID will do the same thing. So that kind of, it passes from the building reporter to the fiscal agent to the CPID, and then on to OCTE for final review. And again, if you're a fiscal or a CPID, there's some additional materials in the knowledge base on your steps. All right. So that's the validation. All right, so we go and we complete the report. You mark the button complete when everything's done. Once it's done, you can't make any more changes to it. Your fiscal agent, authorized official, or your fiscal will be notified by email that you've completed it. And you can also export these, all of your expenditures into an Excel spreadsheet if you want. Every one of those grids has an export function. So you have that available. So the question, yes, this is the question that's been asked for as long as I've been doing this. Can the building reporter see the minimum requirements of their building? And the answer is no, the building reporter cannot see if they've met their match, because they are only a contributor to the total match. And it depends on how the money is spread out across the buildings, so that there, it could all the money could be expended in one building and nothing in another. So it really depends on how the money is spent. But the building reporter cannot see whether they've met their matches or not. That is the responsibility and the privilege of the fiscal agent. All right. To submit your report, again, you operate as a building reporter and you submit it for a building, and that building is passed up to the fiscal agent, which they can review it and verify, again, whether everything has met the match at the fiscal agency level, which then is submitted up to the CPID and then off to the OCTE. And that kind of looks like this. You have the billing reporter who completes it to the fiscal agent, who submits it to the CPID, who reviews it, then lets OCTE know about it. It's also possible that if the fiscal agent looks at your billing report and says, oh, you missed something, they can return it back to you, in which case then it opens back up to you and you can modify it and make changes if you need to. Sometimes it gets all the way up to the OCTE administrator and they realize they forgot something, in which case the OCTE administrator has to return to the CPID, who has to return it to the fiscal, has to return it to the building reporter. And then the building reporter can make changes to the expenditures and then complete it, submit it, review it all the way back up again. All right. Any questions, any additional questions on any of this? When you do imports, if you're doing imports, I would say probably not, because if you're doing an import, I would believe that you would be relying on your financial system to basically be doing all the distributions necessary, because they are allocating out all of the expenditures by function object code, by funding type. So I think that if you're doing imports, that your import would basically be distributed. But then again, we don't do this on a daily basis, and there is 300 different schools and fiscal agents that may have 300 different ways of doing this. So it may vary, but it's, I would expect that if you're doing imports, the imports come from your financial system, which is doing the distributions for you. So you wouldn't need to do distribution tables. It's only if you're doing something that your financial system can't do, or that you would want to take advantage of distribution tables. Any other questions? All right. Well, again, pull this page back up again. If you do have any questions on how to make sure that your imports are created correctly, or that your distribution tables are set up right, or what have you, then by all means call the PTD help desk, or we have an email, we have a toll-free number and a local number. As I said before, John Hazen's on the other end of that. And he is extremely helpful. He's been working on this project since we started 17 years ago. So he knows a lot of the ins and outs and the tricks of the trades, and he knows a lot of different ways to do things. So please take advantage of him. He's available and can help you out. If you do have any questions about policy, like what function code goes to what, and how should I report this expenditure, then you should talk to Joan Church. Take advantage of the knowledge base and all the information you have there. So you have all those types of support. So can we start doing imports now? Yes, you can. As a matter of fact, we have opened up this morning. We've opened up expenditures. There's one or two things that we just want to double check on, but we will probably send out a listserv this afternoon to let everybody know that expenditures is open and ready to go. If it's not today, I think there was one thing that we saw that we need to tweak that we may hold off to announce it until we get this one thing tweaked right. But otherwise, that imports, yeah, you should be able to start doing imports now. Let's see. When will the 107 reports be available for review? As soon as we're told we can release them. We've done this year's 107, and it's going through its review process and up and down the chain over at OCTE and MDE. And as soon as we get the approval, we will put that up. But I'm anticipating it shouldn't be long before we should be able to put that out. And yes, all of the guides are still valid for 2021. We will update the dates on those to make sure, but I talked to Joan yesterday, and she verified for me that they at this point, they are not adding any new function object codes. How do you get on the listserv? You can talk to Jackie Martinez and ask her to put you on the listserv. You can if nothing else, you send a request to the help desk, and they can give you the right link. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if you need to get on the listserv, go ahead and send us an email, and we will send out the link. All right. Any other questions? That pretty much covers all of it. I know it's a lot, and sometimes it can be like drinking from a fire hose, but there's a lot of support, a lot of help. And I think we've got another training next week. And we have this session will be recorded and posted on our website probably by the end of the day. So please take advantage of that. This PowerPoint should be out right now. and it's on the knowledge base in the expenditures section. So I'm pretty sure that one's updated. Yes, and Diana was able to put the link to Jackie Martinez's email in the chat, so you can ask her to get added to the listserv. All right. Well, I will stick around for a few more minutes. If anybody has any other questions, but that's pretty much all we got today. If anybody, like I said, if anybody have more questions, otherwise, have a great day. It looks like it's going to be a nice one. Hope it's nice where you are. And I hope you have a nice, uneventful fall. If that's on the next slide, if you when you close down, you'll probably be asked for a training evaluation. If not, we will send an email link to the training evaluation. But if you can do that, that helps us to make sure that we're getting you the right information you need. So please take a minute and run through the training evaluation. There's a question about the report section on CTEIS. I think I'm wondering if you're talking about the reports themselves. This last year has been a crazy year. We've had a lot of things change. Going from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5 changed just about everything, and it changed all of our reports. And we are still in the process of trying to get our reports caught up to the change. So I'm going to probably say the issue is probably on our end, and we apologize for that. We know that we're slowly getting, now that we've gotten the year started off, we're turning our attention to getting all of those reports reconfigured for CTEIS. I'm sorry, for Perkins 5. But that's a high priority right now, is to get all those reports back up and running, because a lot of them didn't migrate well from all the changes in the last year. So we apologize for that, but hopefully that will change shortly.